Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to another episode of the Climate Psychiatry Alliance Book Club. And our guest today is Dr. Jagadish Shukla, the Distinguished University Professor of Climate Dynamics at George Mason University. Dr. Shukla is internationally recognized for his role in the advancement of weather and climate science. He's received numerous awards, including the Medal for Exceptional Scientific Achievement from NASA, the highest honor given to a civilian by that agency. He was one of the lead authors for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's fourth assessment, for which he and his team shared the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize with Al Gore. Dr. Shukla's book that we'll be discussing today, A Billion Butterflies, is his autobiography of his childhood in India, his scientific career, and his political adventures in the world of climate change. Welcome, Dr. Shukla. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's my real pleasure.
In your book, you give a very vivid picture of your childhood in a small rural community in India that had very limited educational resources. What do you think was most important in allowing you to come from this background and become a world-famous doctoral level scientist?
So this question I'm asked already, and I don't have a good answer. Honestly, because although I have been asked many times. But I'll tell you, as you might have seen, I'm from a very poor family in a village, rural village in India, which had no electricity and no roads, and I drank water from the well, just right in front of my house, which get filled with leaves during the summertime, and there were no books, there were no library. There's nothing, and I used to walk to the high school. Primary school was under a tree. So I'm telling you that under this background, oh, and the only source of light was sun during the day, and at night, kerosene lamp was the light source from which I studied till the primary school. So when you are in a situation like this, you have no idea what's happening. You can call it fate, you can call it luck. Circumstances just push you. You just around. You do this, you do that. Of course, in my case, I was very fortunate. My father, who was a primary school teacher himself, he always was trying to get his children to study and do better than what they're doing. Okay, and then it turns he wanted me to study science, and he found out that the there are no science school anywhere in the neighborhood. So he goes to a place 15 miles away, and he talks to the principal, and he says, "Please admit my son in a science class." He said, "I can't, because he has studied no science till 10th. I just studied Hindi and economics, but I was very good in math. Math was there, okay." And then, anyway, he finally decided to take a test. And then my father goes to a bookstore and buys science books for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 5 grades, and tells me, "Please read this, and there will be a test." So I'm think that if I have to give a one-word answer, a two-word answer, I'll say what really, I always wanted to please my parents. That's absolutely true. I wanted to do the best thing I could do. I wanted to get the best grades I could get because I knew they loved me so much. And in fact, then I loved the village so much. So I think that and then everything was just a accident. I call it, people give me credit, but honestly, it's just a combination of luck and serendipity. It just sort of kept things happening. And but I think that, as you say, it's a long answer that I don't know the real answer.
Well, I think that was a great answer. You do spend a lot of time in your book describing your relationship with your mother and your father. Can you say a little bit about what was most important to you about both of them and how they contributed to your life path?
Oh, actually, I sort of mentioned it.
Yeah.
already. I didn't know this question was the next, but I mean, my mother's love was just absolutely had no limit. Anything you want to do, anything you want to do with the limited resources. And my father, on the other hand, was always interested that we do better and get good grades and so on. So I think that if, I tell people that it could be a combination of my mother's love and my father's push, you know, to you have to do this, you have to do that, and so on. And somehow uh, things started happening in the, always, as I told you about the high school, after high school, same thing after intermediate, I have to go to a college. Where do I go to a college? Well, there was only one university which was giving 200 rupees scholarship. But since you're so, I just said, got admitted into that one. It's called geophysics and geology. That turned out to be. So, I mean, I was so attached to them and so attached to my village that when I was put into the university, there's the city called Varanasi. It's a very famous university called Banaras Hindu University. I decided to run back home, and my relatives were there in Varanasi, and they tried, no, 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 just wait, wait, give some time, and then I stayed, and then of course after some time I really became so bad, I will not even write letters to my mother. They will be worried, where, how will come. But in the beginning, it was just not possible for me to detach myself. The and I think that again, I'm giving these answers which implies as if I know human mind or human nature, which I don't. It's it could be I was trying to please them. I was really trying to always do good things. I always wanted them to feel proud of me, that okay, because they were working so hard for me. So, I mean, I'm basically making up these answers, also knowing what audience I'm talking to, because I tell you the reason I'm saying that is because uh, most of the other people when they ask me that do about them, there's only one answer, and every Indian student say, "Oh, I love them and they love me." Just that's it. That was the most important thing in. But there is a very strict sort of feeling, and by the way, it has gotten so much worse now. Do you know almost all the big internet companies now the in charge are Indians? Most of them, Google, Microsoft, and there are like 100 startups in Westwood. And if you see what is common in them, their parents pushed them and pushed them when they were in college to go to what is called Indian Institute of Technologies, IITs. They are very competitive, very, very competitive. They're like, to get admission, there are like 100,000 people apply for 3,000 seats. And in fact, once there was a 60-minute episode, and this reporter was interviewing this Indian student whose mother had moved to the city just to be with him, cooking his lunch, cooking his breakfast, cooking his dinner, and he was working very hard. And this interview asked him that, what if you don't get admitted? And honest to God, you know what his answer was? Oh, I have already applied to MIT and Caltech for safety. I, I mean, this was his real answer. And so these are this is all, and people ask, and even here, many of the parents who are first generation, they push their parents, children, to really accomplish the most. I don't know whether you guys watch spelling bees. Most of the time, these are Indian kids, champions of the spelling bee. Okay, so that was another sort of indirect answer to your question.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move into your scientific career. You mention in the book A Billion Butterflies that one of the main motivations for your going into meteorology was to come up with a way of predicting the Indian monsoon, an event that shapes the economy of India and decides whether many people live or die each year. The title of your book refers to your conviction that weather events like the monsoon can actually be predicted with enough data, and that contrary to popular chaos theory, climate isn't just the result of numerous small initial conditions that can't be measured.
Yes.
Do you think you've been successful in debunking chaos theory as far as weather is concerned?
Okay. So your question has many components. Okay. So let me just take one by one. The right from my childhood, the only thing I had witnessed and observed was the huge suffering of people in my village. Because I'm from a village and I could see if there's a monsoon drought, if there's a monsoon flood, their roofs are leaking. And so this, I have to admit that somehow this idea of helping my family, helping my village, and helping poor people was just inculcated right from the beginning. And many people have analyzed that, and I think it has all to do with my mother. That sort of just helping, beggars will come and they will ask for things, and she will go and even if some of the uncles are objecting, steal things and give it to them. And so that is something that I used to think that what can I do for my village? And that's the one problem I know. I mean, there's poverty, I cannot change. But one thing I could do was if the monsoon could be predicted, they will have better crop production, they will have better. So I could help. So that motivated me towards that problem, okay, prediction of. But then something very funny happened. And there is another, you might read in the book, there is a very whole bunch of events took place. And I'm face to face in Tokyo with the greatest scientist of the world. His name is Jules Charney, professor at MIT. And I'm questioning some of his theories. And with so little knowledge, and the whole audience is saying, who is this kid? I was 23 years old, 23 or 24. And somehow, by accident, Indian government has nominated me to attend this meeting. So I said, I know what, I'm working for government, but I'd like to go and study there at MIT. So I made that as a goal. And what changed my perception is that this man, he's so famous. And when he, by the way, at the end of the semester, somebody assessed him, somebody said, any questions? The room was absolutely silent. Absolutely nobody was. He said, everybody's just shocked. Who is this fellow? And it's going on and on. And then Charlie raises his hand. I said, I have 4 questions. And 1, 2, 3. And that another moment I cannot explain. I have no explanation except that I'm from a village and we just boldly get into arguments. And I kept going back and forth with him. And just imagine 200, 250 people, all international great scientists, stunned. Who is this guy? And then his last question was, your experiment has proves that I'm right, my paper. I was criticizing his paper. He was not a very modest man, but he really did. He was very. And I says, oh my God, this is over now. And now I can go to Tokyo market, buy some gifts and go back to India. That's the end. That's what most of the foreign delegations, scientists do from India. Guess what? He came to my table, this man. He says, I want to talk to you more. And I was just so nervous. He says, I have written another paper. Let me give it to you. And this conference hall attached to the hotel. So I'm walking behind him, and behind me, the 10 top people in the world. You must have heard Global Weather Experiment, all those, the heads of they're walking because they have been trying to meet him, but they are not able to get his attention. So that is what got me. Well, anyway, so finally he didn't reply my email, but the chairman of the department sends me application. So I says, oh, that's a good sign. I got admitted. Anyway, I went there. And then real kind of challenge, let me tell you. Till that time, I had never heard butterfly effect. and I had never heard limits to predictability. But maybe my ignorance, I wanted to predict seasonal mean, which is beyond 10 days. Okay. And the father of butterfly effect, his name is Lorentz, Professor Red Lorentz, and there's a thing called Lorentz attractor. So every time you see Lorentz, that's butterfly effect. Here's the thing. He was a professor in that department. And again, as I said, it's only MIT decided that these two will be my advisors, Charney and Lorentz. Two of the world's greatest meteorologists, okay, one theoretician, and they'll be my advisor. And so I realized quickly I cannot do a PhD on predicting beyond butterfly effect because I don't have all the arguments, and I have to pass a qualifying. And so I passed my qualifying, and then but as soon as I finished my PhD, I started working on showing that yes, it is possible. And the experiment I did is called a billion butterflies experiment. So, as you already probably know, butterfly effect is basically a very small change in the initial conditions can produce a large change in the outcome. That's also called chaos theory, but chaos theory is the mathematical description. Butterfly effect is a kind of simple name. So I started claiming that no, we can, because the oceans are important and land is important. And but people will not accept it because everybody's so. I told both of them that I want to work on it, and both are very encouraging. Yes, yes. But look, we never said you cannot predict monthly and seasonal average. We just say you cannot predict weather. By weather, really mean instantaneous description of weather, okay, and its evolution. When you're talking monthly and seasonal, you're talking about average. So I did an experiment just to test that. And rather than putting one butterfly, which is normally done in the butterfly experiments, and I tell you what is meant by putting one butterfly, just perturb the initial condition of wind or something, just as if butterfly were flapping. So I said, no, I'll put billions of butterflies, which means I changed the initial conditions a lot, and then did the experiment, and nothing happened. And in fact, some of my students thought, oh, sir, I think we have done a mistake. Nothing, the results are identical. And I was very happy with that because what I had done was use the same ocean temperature in both. So I demonstrated by an experiment using the same language as Lorentz that the boundary conditions of ocean and land are so important that the initial conditions due to butterfly effect they cannot overwhelm that. So this was really the key breakthrough, and people were very happy with this result, and the whole new field is started. It's called dynamical seasonal prediction, that we need to predict. Because till that time, so it was, we're talking about 35, 40 years ago, nobody was using dynamical models to predict season. It was all statistics, just based on statistics. So so that is what really put, and then, of course, as luck will have it, El Nino was predicted, and that will produce, USA's seasonal prediction improved a lot once we learned that these boundary conditions of El Nino are big influence. But nature keeps it modest. The problem that was the most hardest to predict was the monsoon, even with the new model, a new idea. And I used to tell people, okay, see, this is my luck. I started the whole thing from monsoon, and it has the least predictability. Well, it turned out it has to do with the models who are not good enough. And you need the both ocean and atmosphere coupled models. So if I have to precisely answer a question, I have to say that I'm not trying to disprove the chaos theory. Chaos theory is a very solid mathematical concept. And you can take equations and you see how nonlinear interactions keep changing. Okay. But what I did was to be able to show that in even in a chaotic system, the you can be hopeful, you can predict. So my publishers, they found out, and I'm not talking about my personal life, but I can just tell you that there was a huge amount of chaos in my personal life. And if anybody will read the book, they will see that there's just this very. So the publishers felt that, you know what, this guy has managed to find predictability in his life in spite of so much chaos. And then he comes to MIT and he finds predictability in weather and climate. So that's why they chose that title, okay? A Billion Butterflies, a Life of a Scientist in Climate and Chaos Theory. I had a huge fight with them. You cannot use the word theory because what I've done is not theory. I've done model experiments. The theoreticians are very upset about if you claim. And boy, they just went after me. No, 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 Shukla, you have to little bit. Why? It will sell more books. And there is a movie called Chaos Theory, and there's a program called something Chaos, and so on. So anyway, I gave up. But the publishers take care. They want. I mean, they had given a big advance to my book agent and to the person who helped me write, because I just dictated the whole book over 1 year, 18 months time, every day, not every day, every week, 1 hour. But she put the words. So that's sort of, I get a lot of credit. Oh, you write so well. No, that's not true. I just talked and talked. And this lady is such a good writer. She did. And then, by the way, I'm sure all of you must have written books or thinking about writing a book. These writers, my book agent found a very reasonable charge. She was only charging $1 per word. That's
That was
the rate.
considered a good deal, huh?
And there are those who are, those who are very famous, they charge like $1.50 or so. Anyway, so I think that so that's how the title came, A Life in the Climate and Chaos Theory. For this audience, I thought there was no reason to go into detail of the personal chaos in this, but that chaos is still going on. So I'm so attached to my village. I've been here 50 years, and I have gone to my village 100 times in a year. Each trip is a challenge, and the last one many times because of family obligations and so on. So I think that so I'll say, I will not say I have debunked the chaos theory, because chaos theory is chaos theory. There's nothing to debunk. It's a well-grounded theory, but the interpretation of chaos theory by the groups that think you cannot predict beyond 10 days, that definitely I helped debunk. And the result is that we have now institutions which are making seasonal prediction regularly. You'll see, go to NOAA website, they're giving. And almost all the prizes and awards and medals and honors and all the funding I got for 20 years is for that idea that there is predictability in the midst of chaos. So anyway, I don't know if I have covered each aspect of your question, but you can always come back. There's not.
So, how much more predictable is the Indian monsoon now than it was when you were a little boy?
Oh no, much, much, much more, much more. When we were in my childhood, predicting monsoon was like flipping a coin. Sometimes it happens to be right, but it's just because, if you flip a coin, can be right sometime. Okay. In fact, you'll be right 50% of the time, but it's a totally random process. Every time there is a El Nino, there is a prediction that monsoon will be drought, and that has held, with notable exceptions. So you see, as I told you, nature keeps us honest. 1997 was one of the biggest El Ninos. You must be reading in the media that this year El Nino may be as big as 1997 or bigger than that, okay? And the effect, the monsoon comes June, July, August, September, and El Nino develops starting from March all the way till December. So El Nino is bigger after the monsoon, but that year, by April, the ocean was so warm. And I was asked to give a lecture in Geneva. There was a World Climate Conference. And in front of big international audience, they said, this is going to be one of the biggest El Ninos. This is going to be and it turned out to be, it was. But then, because Indian government knows the relationship between the warm ocean temperature, El Nino, and droughts, I started getting phone calls from the Planning Commission and Prime Minister's office. And I boldly predicted it will be a drought year, 1997. Okay. Because there had never been an El Nino that big. And there's no, okay. Guess what? Monsoon was not a drought year that year. So nature keeps us honest. And of course, after that, there are about 15 PhD theses have been written. Why? Why in spite of El Nino? And by the way, including one paper that me and my colleague have just submitted a few months ago, because while El Nino happens in the Pacific, Indian Ocean is a big player. And Indian Ocean messes up the El Nino effect. This was not very well known. So, so we can never predict weather perfectly, and we can never predict seasonal climate perfectly. But our percentage of success is constantly getting better because of understanding.
Thank you. Dr. Shukla, about 20 or 25 years ago, you started working not just in the field of weather prediction, but you started getting active in the field of climate change and global warming. Can you say a little bit about what got you working in that direction?
Okay, all right. So I have to tell you something that is not written in the book. Okay. In 1980s, when I was working on seasonal protection, honestly, I believe because the uncertainty in our models and uncertainty in global warming was so small, so large, and the global warming that had happened till 1980 was so small that to many of us, it appeared like, what do you know? What will happen in next 40 years? We don't know what will happen in next 40 years. But on the other hand, if I can make a progress in seasonal protection, I think that can affect people's lives now. That was okay. So I continued to work, but the climate group, the IPCC, which got shared the Nobel Peace Prize, they had started this process around that time in 80. And my professor, same Professor Charney that I told you, National Academy, he wrote a report. It's called Charney Report. And they say global warming is going to happen. We don't know how much, and they gave a number, 3 degrees. Interesting thing is that 45 years ago, the report was written, and entire models are same as this is. So this group keeps asking people to be part of that report writing, okay? And I was asked twice, and I said no. I'm really too much interested in monsoon prediction. I never did. But for that one, I said yes, I will. For 2 reasons. I had already found, I have seen, everybody's seen that the evidence was much more now. The temperatures had warmed up and models had gotten better. So, when people say there is climate skeptics, I don't like to call them climate skeptics because I was one of the people at some stage 30 years ago where I didn't think the evidence was enough. I totally understand climate science, but I thought it was dangerous for people to go on TV and say that global warming is here because we didn't have enough data. But see, that year, I joined this group. And as a part of joining the group, we have to read every paper because it's called climate assessment. Every paper. And of course, you cannot read every paper. So we have a committee and we divide who will read what and so on. And honestly, I was thinking, okay, this is real now. This is real, and I changed. So I still do not work on climate change. I teach climate change, to the undergraduates. Because in order to work on climate change research, you need a very massive supercomputer. Because, by the way, you know, these models that I told you from which we predict, maybe this will be of interest to you and your audience. These models solve about 1 billion equations, okay, in time steps of 2 or 3 minutes for 10 years, 100 years. That's how weather prediction is done. You divide the globe into about 1 million boxes at different layers, and in the ocean, over land, and then you have got like 10 million, if you have a bigger computer, 100 million boxes. Each box has 10 equations, and you solve that in the time steps of 3 minutes. So that's why weather prediction is done with a very, very high resolution models. But the climate prediction cannot be done with such, because you require to integrate the model for 10 years, sometimes 100 years. So I think that the models had become so good now that we can now, that's why that report 2000 said, we are now sure that human activities are affecting. Because, climate, that was the biggest controversy. Is our activity affecting it? And that was, and that's, by the way, that's where comes, later you'll see in the chapter about my letter to Obama. But so that's how I got involved. And now I teach, I lecture, but the actual research on how much global warming will take place requires very, very big supercomputers, and only 4 or 5 groups in USA, actually 3, and about 20 in the world who have that capacity to do it. But we are all work with that.
You mentioned the letter to Obama. I wanted to get into that a little bit. That's chapter 17 of your book, which was one of my favorite chapters. You described the letter that you sent to President Obama and the Department of Justice, suggesting that a RICO investigation of the fossil fuel industry be started for the fossil fuel industry having knowingly deceived the American public about the role fossil fuels play in climate change.
Yes.
And as a result of that letter, you were subjected to severe harassment from right-wing fossil fuel supported groups and congressmen. I was wondering if
Yes.
you can describe a little bit about what that was like and the effects it had on you.
Yeah. Well, I lost sleep for some time. And I always used to tell people, oh, no, I don't know what is stress, what is, although I just decided, no, this is, so the letter was written in a spirit of a certain amount of naivety that, hey, because we do it all the time, we write a letter. So all I did was I wrote a letter to 20 of my friends, and they're all very distinguished people, members of the National Academy and, the sort of sign. And I said, do you guys agree? And will you sign the letter? They said, yeah, we agree. And we read the letter and then prepared a draft and we circulated. And one of them said, oh, and I was writing to Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Why to him? Because Washington Post had a op-ed. He had written. And he said, let's do what was done to tobacco industry. Tobacco industry was not really listening. So the RICO did, and I just, I still remember that day. I told my wife, look at it. Did you see this article? I think that's what we need to do for fossil fuel. Not knowing how much of reaction this will create, okay? We read the thing. I mean, Obama wrote a very nice letter. I have actually put it in the book. Oh my goodness, they went after me like go back to India, and I couldn't pick up my phone. They tell my university indirectly fire this professor, and nothing happened. I just completely ignored them, and nothing was happening. Then this congressman goes to the National Science Foundation and NOAA and NASA and writes to their inspector general. Inspector general is the highest authority which does investigate. Can you please look into all the grants you have given this man in the last 20 years? And that was painful, let me tell you, because if the chairman of the Congressional Science Committee writes to Inspector General or the director, they listen. They have to just do it. And they told me later, and we had to carry, I don't know, every document, every bill that was paid in 10 years. And people kept telling me that, why don't you withdraw? All they wanted was for me to withdraw the letter, and then they can make the point that climate scientists are dishonest people. And that's why they believe in global warming. That's one of the big lines. And somehow, and again, you can say this is my village culture. I said, I am not going to withdraw, and I want to let it go on as far as it goes. And guess what? 16 subpoenas. So when Inspector General's right, they don't say letter, subpoena number, this, send this times 6, send this, send that. Okay. And we kept doing. And then we're just waiting for the report. And that was very painful because you don't know what will happen. I think I started taking sleeping pills, but I was not prepared to admit and that there is anything wrong in it. And then the attorney who was helping me, she sends me an email. Dr. Shukla, an early Christmas gift for you. And it was the report of the Inspector General. It had 4 lines, 4 sentences. This investigation has no basis. It should be stopped right away. No further questions should be asked. So in some way, that was a real. But our real satisfaction came 3 days later. This congressman resigned. He says he will not run. His name is Smith. And because he had put so much investment in proving, and he was subpoenaing climate scientists one after the other. But to me, because I had got government grant for 20 years, he thought that's something he can go to this. So anyway, I really think that in the end, I feel very proud that I fought in the end. And because I always thought this is a small price to pay to defend the integrity of climate science. And it will be better. By the way, they have not stopped doing. And now, after Trump came, they're absolutely, many people have told me, Shukla, are they going to open that investigation now that Trump is president? I said, I don't know, because, but Trump is busy with so many bigger things that he probably, so far as climate is concerned, he has got what he wanted. He got, EPA head, and he has got everybody saying climate change is a hoax. He started it. So it's a very depressing time for climate scientists, but we are still continuing to, do our climate research, and we're hoping that it will go away. And the international community is still doing, so I give many lectures internationally. And every time I'm about to give a lecture here, everybody tells me, don't say anything. Don't say anything. I say, well, I'm not going to say anything new, but I have to say whatever I have been always saying. That sort of. So I think that, it is the what is happening now about climate in the current administration. Let me tell you, it's being destroyed. It's just being destroyed. The institutions are being destroyed. Groups are being destroyed. And we just hope it is not. And we're having a problem telling graduate students why it's a great field now. You see, so it's a very bad time. But we are hopeful that it will really all come back.
Well, given what the Trump administration is doing, and I was just reading today about his attempts to eliminate the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, given all the things that he and Lee Zeldin have done to set back climate science, do you think science stands a chance against money and politics in the end?
No, well, this is not going to be ever. The culture of science is not, they're not going to kill that. The scientists, they're creating a temporary obstacle in doing science. And the thing is that it's not clear whether they are against science. The whole National Center in Boulder, I worked with the center for so many years, and I have like, that's because the governor of Colorado will not do what he wants to do. So it is just a payback to her, to governor. And so he looked at whatever are the big organizations in Colorado, and he's going after that. This is not the only one. There's another one he's going after in Colorado. No, it's just beyond. It's beyond. I'm sure you guys are experts to understand. All I can tell you is that we have heard students having anxiety about climate change by itself, even before Trump, because of the what things will happen. And my answer to them is that, look, the answer to climate anxiety is climate action. Get involved. Get involved with something.
Well, that's very interesting because that's the same conclusion that a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists have come to as well in terms of counseling their patients that talk about climate anxiety, that the best thing for them to do is to get involved in
Oh,
climate
great, great.
action.
I had not consulted. And this is a few years ago. I just came up with it because we were also involved with a lot of, climate protests and climate action. And some of my students, in fact, one of my students was in Nancy Pelosi's office many years ago, and she was all over. So yeah, I think that's the to give up is not an option. That's for absolutely sure.
I'd like to open things up now to our audience if they have questions or comments they'd like to direct towards you. If you have something, please raise your hand on Zoom and I will call on people in order. And this is your chance to ask Dr. Shukla a question yourselves if you have some. We'll see what we get here.
Uh, I think Jacob does. His hand is raised, but I am much like you, Dr. Shukla. I have many questions, more than four, and I'll get to some later, but let's have Jacob, you want to read yours or say that?
Yeah,
And do
I'm
I have to unmute all so that he can, oh, you can do it. Okay.
happy to speak, and thank you, sir, for being here, and thank you for all of your the great public education campaign that you've carried out here. Something that's really been on my mind. You mentioned about many of us will be involved in our own writing and our own kind of communication about this to the masses, and I have been working to try and write about this topic and to try and educate people and think a little bit about where we've come from in climate and not just be so myopic as to really focus only on what's happened recently. I've really been thinking about the 1970s, the Bola cyclone, which of course parked in the Bay of Bengal, became incredibly
Yes.
powerful, and without really much warning, especially with kind of some of the political tension between the different nearby nations there. While maybe the Indian Meteorological Society was aware of some of this, there really wasn't that much mass warning, unfortunately, and so great was the tragedy that followed. Uh, Obviously, having predictions, knowing what could happen is only part of protecting people. And there's kind of the fast and the slow of fast being warning people that they're about to be killed by a cyclone, the slow being the larger effort of education and of letting people know about these risks kind of in a larger sense. But I wonder if you could just speak to the importance of kind of when we learn what we've learned, what you've learned, how central do you see the communication part about this, the
Oh,
education part
that's
about this?
that's very, very important question. First of all, about the cyclone. So, by the way, tropical cyclones is one of my areas of interest. I know all about that cyclone. 300,000 people or so died. But at that time, our ability to predict urban weather was really very poor. Number one, we didn't have observations. We didn't have the satellite observations. And then there's no communication ability. Now it's a coupled prediction and disaster management system. So governments have both prediction systems, but also they have equally strong disaster management system. Okay, and the kind of cyclones that have killed 10,000, 11,000 people in the past, at least for the Indian coast, same place almost, 5 years ago, 10 people died. Okay, from 10,000 to now. And of course, I have to tell you that the guy who's in charge of disaster management, he and I were in the same seminar. And I was just going on and on our predictability and how our models are good. And he raised his hand, sir, disaster management, it doesn't matter how good your forecast is. You're so right. Unless you communicate that to the people, number one, so you have communicate. And not only communicate, you should have the mechanism to save the people and transport them. Okay, so you are absolutely right. We certainly need that, and that's one of the big innovations in weather prediction. Okay, thank you very much.
Robin, did you want to go ahead?
And does anyone else have I don't want to dominate, but I'm going to jump on Jacob's question and your response, particularly. And you mentioned earlier, and we've all been reading, I think, just in the last week, the potential predictions, and you're so involved in that predictive area of the El Nino that is predicted for the end of this year and 2027.
Yes.
And I want to connect that. I'd like your thoughts about the predictability of that, the intersection of climate change with those El Nino patterns,
Okay.
but then also have you comment on what you've just brought up, the disaster management systems that are necessary as we anticipate the end of this year and next year.
Okay, so this is just absolutely an amazing question, but the one that has not been fully answered. So just to get you some background, that in the whole weather and climate field, there are 3 distinct time scales, and each one of them has different predictability. Each one of them has different physical processes, and each one requires different kind of models. What are the 3? One is the weather prediction. This is the day-to-day that we're predicting. The other one is seasonal to interannual. That requires seasonal and El Nino. Do you know, till El Nino effect was recognized about 30, 40 years ago, as I said, that's how my whole book title is based on, there was no hope for anything beyond 10 days. Prediction, we can improve. So it completely changed. If you are in geophysics, there's a word called plate tectonics. The plate tectonics changed the whole concept of Earth and how continents were formed and so on. So I call them that El Nino is the plate tectonics of our field, okay? Because it completely changed, and now you see it is affected. Now, why El Nino is caused by interaction between the atmosphere and ocean. So the wind changes the temperature changes the wind. Everywhere you have a non-linear process like that, it is less predictable because you do some error in one and you do the other, okay? So I think that we have achieved quite a bit success in predicting El Ninos several months in advance, okay? Doesn't mean we predict exactly how strong it will be. And certainly we don't know what the impacts will be all over the world. But except that I know that it affects global, yeah.
Can we predict in locales, or is it a bigger geographic predictive
so this is right. So that's the any locality, the predictability is a function of space and time scale. That's just the key thing you have to remember. If you're trying to predict average over a large area, yes, that's more predictable. If you're trying to predict rainfall over San Francisco, forget it. Because El Nino or no El Nino, there will be a lot of fluctuations. That's basically, so that's why the short range forecast, we may predict fluctuations, short range. And then climate change comes, and one of the big questions which we have not come to any agreement on in the scientific community, what will climate change do to the frequency and intensity of El Nino? And the reason is because you need several hundred years of data to validate the models. And we have only less than 100 years of data. But definitely that's something that, and whenever you talk about climate change, this will happen. You always have to wait. But we don't know what the El Nino effect will be. Because we know now, we know that every time there's an El Nino, global mean temperature goes up, and it will go up again next year. So the normal cycle goes up and down, and El Nino modifies that or undulates that. About the impact, this is one of the most gratifying things about the work on seasonal prediction. Farmers in South America who depend upon the El Nino and their planting season, they can now plan as soon as they know there's El Nino coming.
Dr. Shukla, I wanted to go back to Barack Obama's response to your letter.
Yes.
That you mentioned and you have in your book. Obama's response was very supportive of the whole idea of climate change. He definitely agreed to it. He mentioned a number of things that his administration was trying to put into place to deal with it. But he did not start the investigation that you had, recommended in your letter. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Oh, yes.
Why he didn't do that?
Oh, absolutely. I tell you, he had many, many battles that he was fighting. Okay. He did not touch the climate problem in a significant way. His focus was so much on health, the Obama healthcare plan. And he didn't want to he wasted a lot of time, by the way, in our opinion. He could have done both. He could have done, because in the end, Republicans didn't come and support his healthcare. Ultimately, it passed by the Democratic support anyway. But we missed an opportunity. But it was a calculation on his part, a smart calculation, because he knew, the fact that he replied my letter, when I told the attorneys, their reaction was, Dr. Shukla, don't publicize this information that Obama has replied. Don't send that letter. And it is just because of the politics is such that it would have created even more people. So he didn't want to join that. I think it was purely political reason. He believes in it, but he just didn't want to tell his attorney general to launch, because there's such a big thing. You know what a big thing it became to launch RICO for tobacco. It just got such a good result, but he just didn't want to waste his energy or political capital, whatever it is called, on this.
I would suggest that error of missing opportunities
it was
keeps
missing
happening
opportunity.
over and over.
And I tell you, he could have got a legislation passed. He has both houses, but he didn't. He just didn't want to pick up fights. And by the time he realized that nothing's going to happen, it was too late. This is a big missed opportunity that we could have had a climate legislation. And now you can do it. It has not been possible. They're just cutting down.
You also mentioned in your book that the ozone hole problem was solved relatively quickly compared to the climate problems that we have. Any thoughts on why that one got solved so quickly?
Yes. No, I think we have a clear idea, and people use this argument that these are the ingredients of having a successful climate policy. Number one, the business community has to be on board so that they stop pulling you back and pulling you down. For climate change, this is just the opposite. The fossil fuel industry is just making it harder. Okay, so in that case, now you may ask why the business community was. The inside story I've heard is that some companies had found a way, other products, but they will not announce it because they were going to have the advantage. So it was relatively cheaper to fix the problem, number one. And the business community, the manufacturers, had a solution. And both things happened. And the problem was so well defined. But in the climate change, it's a very, very complex problem. I'll just tell you, I normally say that in the beginning of the lectures, all the progress civilization has made in the last 200 years, is because of fossil fuels. We have a better transportation, we have better, everything. But now we have realized that it is hurting, it is going to hurt. So it's very hard for people to do that. So I really think that it's a missed opportunity, and Biden was on the right path. He knew that he cannot pass a law. So he just, rather than punishing people, he gave incentives, which now the current administration is cutting down.
Well, I think we're just about at time.
There's somebody has hands up.
Are there other questions?
Uh,
Robin, did you want to?
Well, I
Okay.
always have more questions, and you've only opened up my mind to many questions that I wish we could, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to pursue another time, maybe when I'm in DC.
So no,
Um,
you're absolutely welcome. You have my email, right? I think that
uh,
Robert
so,
has my email. I love to,
Yeah.
because I love to talk. By the way, when people say, what are the things climate scientists can do you know one of the things they say? Talk. Talk to the people who are interested.
yeah, I want to say one thing about the merger of your field or your personality and our understanding of psychology and human growth and development. You mentioned it early on. You seem to be, as I'm listening to you, a rather humble man. But I would suggest that there's a lot more in your thread of your career and your life than just luck and happenstance. I would say that there are persistent things about you that you sound to me like you not only wanted to honor your parents in an important way, but I've been very impressed with how you have wed your own personal story and your commitment to your community and your commitment to changing life in an impoverished community with your professional career, and how though that tenacity over time really speaks enormously. And it actually is, you also mentioned that the best thing for climate anxiety is action, and you
Yes,
mentioned
yes.
Nancy Pelosi. She's my congressman. She says, "Don't agonize, organize." But
Yes.
I would say that you have shown us that it is not just action, it's persistent action over time in the face of setbacks. And that's really incredibly important, how we sustain that. And I see you as an extraordinary
Thank you. Thank you.
model for that.
Thank you so much. I mean, there's truth to it. I had to focus and I will not deviate, number one. You know, Charlie was one of the greatest people in the field, and he told me, oh, climate change is going to be a great problem. And I said, I'm not interested. Then there's a scientist at Princeton, his name is Manabe, and he's the one who got Nobel Prize in physics a few years ago. And he became my advisor. And he was working on global warming. And I said, Suki, first name is Suki. I'm not interested in global. I mean, he appreciates that. And I kept my focus on seasonal and monsoon protection. And I feel good about it. I mean, you can do. And you're right about the people in society. I don't know whether I mentioned. I have opened a college for girls in my village in this. So that's because I wanted to do something, and not just for the rainfall, but also for these young girls on this. But thank you so much. I really appreciate what you just said. It's that nobody has said it so beautifully about.
Well, Dr. Shukla, I want to thank you for being our guest tonight. This has been a fantastic discussion, and it's been wonderful to learn about you and meet you. And I'm hoping that we can continue these discussions in the future. Many of us actually go to George Mason University every year for the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health annual meeting.
Oh, really? I
Yeah,
see.
so we will definitely look you up the next
Oh,
time
yeah,
we're
yeah.
there.
No, just send me an email in advance, and I just say, I
Okay.
one thing I have is time because I just retired. last year. Okay. So, and I'll love to. And anybody who's listening, they want to talk on the phone, or if they're happen to be in town, we can have tea or lunch together and we can talk.
Love to.
Okay.
Love
Very
to.
good.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
thank you again, and thanks for everybody who joined